Welcome to Gen Z Hoops, the Gen Z basketball, coaching, and sports business show. On this podcast, you'll learn from professional players, coaches, and executives from all over the world and see the court in a brand new way. And now, joining you courtside, your Gen Z host, John Hartofilis.
Hey, Coach Matt, what's going on?
How you doing, John? Thanks for having me.
Really excited to have you on. We're talking for a while and battling the issues of time zones and all this stuff going on. We got on the phone, and I'm really excited to speak with you about. Really all the experience you've had. I'm going through your LinkedIn now. I'm pressing show 5 more, and my finger hurts. There's like 30 of them, 45 of them. So there's definitely a lot of stuff to talk about. You've been everywhere all over the world. You haven't been to New York yet, but we'll hopefully that changes soon. But you've been everywhere else. You've been to every other country. So we'll definitely talk about all that. And I'm really excited having you on. For my first question really is just to understand a little bit more about maybe where you originally came from and where this passion kind of stemmed from. And when you were in high school, did you always play the game? Did you always know that coaching was in the works for you? How did that all play out?
Yeah, so I grew up in a small town in Michigan called Rockford, Michigan. And really, basketball was my thing since I could walk. I had an older brother who played basketball, was a very good high school player, didn't go on to play college. He probably could have played small college ball if he wanted to, but he ended up just going to Michigan State to study. But growing up in Michigan, I just basically wanted to be just like my brother. He was kind of that role model. So I just grew up being in love with ball and put a lot of time into it, and went to a school called Rockford High School. We had a really good 4 years there, kind of a small city, but a big school district. So we got to play against the top teams in the state. Had a good senior year. Our team went 22-3 back in high school. This was back in 2009. And then just had a bunch of offers at small colleges. No D1 offers. I don't really pass the eye tests. I'm 5'9", little guy as a player. So I then went to a school called Spring Arbor University, played for 4 years there and studied. And then I went on to play overseas. And my goal was always to play as long as I could and then coach as long as I could. And since I knew that playing wouldn't last forever, I would always try to take coaching jobs in between my professional playing seasons, or even in between high school and college seasons, whether it was working basketball camps, working as an assistant, head coach of youth teams, whatever it might have been, just to try to build that resume and build that experience. So I would be ready for coaching when the time came. But yeah, I'd been playing overseas in multiple countries, and about 2 years ago, I stopped officially playing to really delve into coaching. And I had always taken some coaching jobs here and there in between, but I'd play a season, coach a season, play a season, coach a season, because I would need something to do in between. Again, I'm 5'9", so I don't get jobs like the 7-foot guy does. So I had to try to make some money in between my playing jobs as well. So kind of coaching was that outlet for me. And my first season where I officially retired, 2019, officially retired from playing and was coaching, I will admit there was a little part of me that was like, maybe I still want to play. But now I love it more than I thought I would, to be honest. I didn't always know the path. You asked if I always knew coaching would be. I didn't know for sure if it would be pro coaching. I always thought I'd coach college in the U.S. I didn't anticipate I would have traveled this much, even though I would, of course, have loved to have traveled. I enjoyed it. It was a goal of mine, but you never know if it's actually going to happen. And so throughout all this travel, I've kind of got into the overseas game back at us, which I did coaching at, was done playing. So I'd always kind of, was my plan, play as long as you can and then coach as long as you can. And now I'm kind of in the beginning journeys of being a head coach overseas.
So talking about maybe being an undersized point guard and maybe not passing the eye test right away. What was it like originally when you left high school, trying to get looks overseas? What did that really look like for you in deciding where you were going to play and how you were going to take that next step?
As I mentioned, I grew up in Michigan. So my dream was to kind of play at Michigan State. Michigan State for Tom Izzo. I wanted to be a Division I guard, and I don't pass the eye test, and I never got any Division I offers. I could have walked on to a couple. I had a couple of Division II offers. I had about 9 small college NAI or Division III offers, but just kind of knowing that I was a small guy and I don't pass that eye test, I always knew I'd have to work really hard to get any job I might get. There's 1,000 more than 1,000 point guards out there. So coming out of high school, it was just really just trying to find the best fit for me. Once I realized maybe I wasn't going to get a ton of D1 looks, I was trying to find the best fit for me and really who could pay me money. So for scholarships, so I could get my school paid for. And I ended up going to Spring Arbor University, got to start there for 4 years. Wasn't the D1 level I wanted, but I loved my time there and got to play some great competition in NAIA. We played in the toughest conference in the country at the time, had a bunch of Division I transfers. I got to the Elite Eight one year, had some good seasons, and then really ended up going to Australia off of crazy story. I had always wanted to play in Australia, and it was one of the top places I wanted to travel to when I was a kid. And this was about 2 weeks after my senior season ended in college. I was just sitting in my apartment with my roommates, probably playing video games or something at the time. And I get a call from an agent. He said, a guy I had never met before, just a random call. I didn't even know who he was. He called me saying, I see you're looking for a job. I have a team in Australia that needs a point guard. Would you be interested in it? So I must have made a profile on a recruiting website or something, or Eurobasket.com, which is a website that hosts a bunch of overseas players. And apparently he saw my profile and I kind of fit what he thought the team was looking for. And really, I really got lucky there because it worked out. Being a 5'9" guard, it's tough to even get started. That's the hardest part, is getting started when you're trying to play overseas. And this agent ended up sending me to this team in Australia. I went over there, had a really good season. So then I got another team asking me to go back to Australia. And that kind of just got my whole overseas career started. The hardest part is getting started. Once you do, if you play well, you make connections, you can kind of get familiar with coaches, general managers, players of other leagues, and stay in contact, and the resume grows, and the career kind of took off from there. So one phone call kind of started it all for me. As soon as I graduated college, kind of took me to Australia. So I was very fortunate for that.
Off the bat, it might be difficult by being an undersized point guard and having that happen. But I mean, just taking a look at some of the places you've been and what you've done there, I mean, it's pretty obvious that you proved a lot of people wrong, right? I mean, the numbers, I mean, I'm going through it. I just see points in the 20s, sometimes in the 30s. I see assist numbers in the right over 10. It's like, wow, like that, this is crazy. And we'll definitely jump into all that. But the one thing I wanted to point out is one of your scouting report from one of your first coaches. And basically he said a lot of great things about you, but the one part that I thought was really cool was he said, Matt can score 40 on any given night, but would rather get 15 assists. I mean, what was that like to you and really trying to facilitate with your teammates?
I always grew up kind of a floor general, pass first guy first, but really it was kind of whatever the team needed of me. I would always try to train myself to be able to score when needed. So I was fortunate enough to have a couple seasons where I put up the numbers that you mentioned, but I was always a very unselfish guy. I just wanted to win, didn't really care about the accolades. So I would try to, get my teammates involved. It was just my natural game. I know I mentioned my brother was kind of my role model in basketball, and that's how his game was. So I'm sure I modeled it a little bit after him. But just being that undersized floor general too, I think it's kind of normal to be a pass first guy at my height and my position. And then as I developed my game, I started to score more. It wasn't always that way. Even in college, I wasn't a high points per game guy. It wasn't really until I got overseas that I really started scoring the ball the way that kind of carried me throughout my career. But yeah, my mentality was always step in the gym and see who you can make better. So was always that floor general guy. Just kind of had some mentors that instilled that in me.
I mean, I'm curious maybe how basketball is different at all these different stops. So you were in Australia, Cambodia, Ireland, Vietnam, all these places just to start. I mean, one of those stops when you were in Thailand, you averaged 34.6 points per game and 7 assists per game to lead the league, 1 league MVP. Like in a league, I'm just thinking in terms of like just seeing how the numbers, when years are so close to each other, they're different or there's championships and some. Like what was maybe the biggest difference maybe in Thailand than there were in all these other places? Maybe like in the Vietnam that just preceded it, or in the Ireland and in places like that you were playing in almost all at the same time?
Yeah, that's a good question. I mean, so obviously some stats are higher in other leagues. Maybe the competition is not as high where my stats were higher, or some leagues better than others. But I mean, one thing I've learned in almost outside of Ireland and a couple other places, in almost all the countries I've played in, I've had teammates who couldn't speak English sometimes, couldn't speak the language. One thing I've learned is really just being on the court, playing ball, you can communicate without having to speak the same language. You just find a way to make it work. So I've always noticed the locals are kind of different in every country, how you interact with them. Some countries, I played in Ireland, there's more of a laid back culture there. Some teams practice a few days a week, some were every day, but just kind of a little bit more laid back there. But you could still communicate with them in your own way. And then get to places like some teams in Vietnam are going 2 times per day. They're working real hard. They're real disciplined. That's how our team is right now, training these guys a couple times a day. So really every place, I think the locals were different, but most leagues had 2 Americans. So the imports, they call them imports, the American players, that's kind of consistent across the land. Obviously, the better the league is, the better the talent of the imports. But really, it's just getting used to the locals, how they like to be coached, how you like to play with them as a player. Every country has its own kind of style with local players and the way they just work, their work ethic and everything. So that can take adapting to, but like I said, it's guys once you get on the court. So just depends on the place and all that.
That's what's so interesting, the dynamic between maybe just being imported in another country and there's only so few of them. So obviously there's super high expectations, or the fact that, right, I mean, like you mentioned, Vietnam, the practicing there was different than practicing in other places. And right, in the way that people maybe approach the game or in those leagues, basketball is very different. That's what I find fascinating. But thinking about maybe as you progress in your career, when you started coaching at the same time, I mean, we keep on saying at the same time, I'm curious, was it really at the same, were there times where you play in one game and go coach in another game? Did that ever happen?
Well, for example, in 2018, I believe I lived in 6 countries. So I was bouncing around a lot because maybe one season is 2 to 3 months long. And then my next season doesn't start for 2 more months. So I don't want to just be sitting around. I would try to take a coaching job in between. For example, I was in Hong Kong in 2018. And then I went to Malaysia right after that for a month, where I was just kind of coaching kids and running basketball camps. And then later I went to play for 2 months in Thailand, or 3 months in Thailand. And then when the season ended, I needed a job. I went to Cambodia for 2 months to coach. So I was really kind of bouncing around. So not literally at the same time. As far as pro coaching for Cambodia, I was assisting their national teams. That was a higher level than the youth. But there were some instances where I would be coaching youth basketball and also playing pro at the same time, just to kind of make some extra money and keep a job and be able to stay in the region when we were in the off season. I did that in Thailand a few times, as well as some other countries. But as far as coaching pro, I was never playing and coaching pro at the same time. That might have been a little tricky.
Definitely a little tricky. Obviously, though, with seeing just so many things with the dates all close together, I knew right they were coming one up together and you were juggling a lot. Wasn't sure really how that would play out. It's definitely funny just seeing all that, right, that passion for basketball, just obviously shining through all that. I mean, right, we mentioned all the different maybe styles of play from country to country, but you've also coached, I saw you coach 3-on-3 before. You just mentioned national team levels to youth levels. Maybe starting with 3-on-3, I mean, how different was that for you in a variation of the sport that's really exploding in recent years?
Yeah, so 3-on-3 is kind of the new wave around the world. It's Olympic sport now, just really getting popular. And in Vietnam, it's where I am now, it's really growing. Just won the bronze medal in the Southeast Asian Games out here, which is the first time that's ever been done. So even in Vietnam, it's becoming more popular. So did I really learn the 3-on-3 game and how to coach it? And it's fun to coach because to me, it reminds me of playing backyard ball back home. In Michigan, we had something called a Gus Macker, which were 3-on-3 tournaments on the beach every summer and very popular. So for me, it brings back memories of that, but also the FIBA style internationally is much different. It's a quick pace game. If you score, then you check the ball. That doesn't happen. Style 3-on-3. It's very fast paced. Trying to formulate a strategy for that was all new to me. So I had to learn on the fly. And now I kind of have a set routine and a set way of running practices for 3-on-3 and how I would want to coach it. It's all having quick transitions. If somebody scores, get the ball out quick. You look for twos and layups. It's almost analytical, just like even 5-on-5 can be. We play that style even in 3-on-3, trying to avoid long mid-range shots. So definitely a technique and a strategy to be taught, which I've only learned over the last year or so because 3 is me. But I love the atmosphere at the games, the tournaments. I've played in a couple the past year and coached in a couple. So it's been fun to see it from both sides.
So it's an incredible thing about all the different variations and all the experiences you learn from that obviously you're applying to what you're doing now. I'm curious, maybe with your most recent like full head coaching gig down in Vietnam with the Saigon Heat. I mean, that's obviously got to be, I mean, you've been playing Vietnam for years before that, but I mean, what's that adjustment been like to you being the head coach for a team where you guys have won the championship before, you've had a lot of success there, and now you're taking the head coaching role and continuing that?
Really, I think me getting into coaching has been perfect timing because, first of all, COVID's hit, and I stopped playing right before COVID hit, which has made getting playing jobs a little bit more difficult when leagues are getting canceled all around the world. And especially for a guy like me who doesn't pass the eye test, it can be tougher to get jobs already, let alone when COVID's hit. So I got into coaching with Saigon Heat about 2 years ago now, and it's been an amazing experience. I started as the assistant coach under somebody named Kevin Yerkes, who is the head coach here. He's the director of basketball now for the Vietnam national team, and he kind of brought me in under him, and I jumped at the opportunity because Saigon Heat is one of the premier organizations in Southeast Asia. It's run very professionally. We play in the ASEAN Basketball League. I'm not sure if you've heard of that. It's kind of like the Euro League of Asia, where there's 10 teams from 9 different countries in Asia. A lot of former NBA guys, a lot of former G League guys playing it. And then we also play in the local league, the Vietnam Basketball Association, which is what I'm coaching right now. And this is the local league, 8 teams across Vietnam. It's a really fun atmosphere at all the games. The fans go crazy. They get out the thunder sticks. They get the drums at the games. They go crazy if they see a normal dunk, that kind of thing. So they just really bring the passion and the energy. It's really loud. You can't hear. You have to use hand signals at games. So it's really fun. And then our team is just, we have a very young team, a bunch of guys who never talk back. They respect me. They work really hard. A bunch of guys who just do anything you ask of them. So as a young coach, like you mentioned, you are a young coach. I'm also a young coach at age 30 in the pro ranks. I'm probably the youngest coach in the league this year. So all I could ask for is some guys who can really respect me and listen. And that's what I have with my team. So it's been great coaching the Saigon Heat. We are back-to-back champions. I wasn't here for the 2019 championship. That was before I arrived, but I was the assistant coach last year for the 2020 championship. And now this year, if we could get it done, it would be a three-peat, which would be an amazing accomplishment, but going to be hard, not going to be easy. A lot of good teams in the league this year. And I get to step into this role as the head coach of a team that won 2 championships in a row. So it's a lot of pressure, but it's more so a great opportunity because the organization is kind of first class. And I'm just very humbled to be working for them this year. It's been a fun ride, and I'm learning a lot, not just Coach Yerkes, who was the former head coach. He really did a great job of grooming me to help fill this role, and he taught me a lot. We also have general managers and team presidents who are great at their jobs and just people who are very experienced, and I'm learning from them every day. So being a part of this organization has been a great learning experience. And to be honest, just to put it in one word, it's really fun. Head coaching, it can be stressful, full on, very busy, a lot of tasks because you're basically managing 15 players. So you're responsible for a lot of people, but it's really fun. Our league's about to start. The first game is supposed to be within the week, and looking forward to get going, really.
Definitely. I mean, it sounds so exciting. I'm really excited too, because I've obviously, being from the States, haven't really been exposed to Vietnamese basketball before. And now with you, Coach Ryan, on the show, but right before now, I really want to start tuning in and watching. So I'm going to be looking for stream links and figuring out how to
sure, they're all on
zone.
YouTube. Every game is live.
I gotta be able to make time and watch them, because when I'm having so many guests on from there, it's just like with the G League, I'm tuning in, and it's gonna be a lot of fun. Like seeing you on the sideline and stuff. I'm definitely gonna make sure I'm doing that. But it's so cool thinking about the winning basketball that you've obviously been playing there, and even your whole career. And you mentioned being a young coach. I'm curious, maybe because it's something that's near and dear to me, right? Being a young coach as well, and you mentioned that you might be the youngest coach in the league, just overall. In terms of how your roles maybe change, I mean, because you've even been a younger coach. You've been like in your mid-20s, being able to relate to players in a way that an older coach wouldn't. And now, right, assuming that the being a head coach in that head leadership position, being able to keep that same approach with guys, it's got to be a huge advantage for you.
I mean, I think being a player recently, I kind of know how players think. I can kind of relate to them. I know all the tricks if they're trying to get out of a workout or just little things like that. And I think I have a good understanding of when players need to be pushed, how to communicate with them. But obviously, as a young coach, is still something I'm learning and feeling out. But like I said, also, I learned a lot from Kevin Yerkes, who was the coach before. And he's really taught me a lot about how to kind of manage personalities. And it's not just about the X's and O's. You got to come across to each player, which come across for the best way that fits that player, how you communicate to them. And I'm really learning that. And some of these guys in the league I've even played against and played with. So, because I played in Vietnam in 2017, there were still some players who are playing now who were on my team actually in that league now. So one advantage of being a young coach is I actually have a great understanding of the players in the league and the level and the competition, because I know these guys. Some of them were my teammates. So that from that standpoint, that has been a major help in me being able to prepare, kind of scout, and just coach my team, as I know the league well now that I've been around it for 3 or 4 years and both coached and played against some of these guys.
It's so cool. I'm thinking about the coaching experience and how your playing experience is helping you with that, and how you've been able to pull from all these different places. One thing that we haven't gotten to talk about at all, which I thought was so cool, is that, I mean, even while you were playing, you started Van Pelt Sports Management. And I'm curious, right, as to what really went on there, and you thinking while you're a player to really think ahead in your career and say, okay, let me try to do something that's going to actually help me, but allow me to help some other people in my position down the line.
Yeah, so I started Van Pelt Sports Management in 2015, September 2015, and it's kind of taken off from there. What happened was I was playing in Australia in 2014, and the American on the team, I became good friends with him. He and I had finished playing in Australia. We returned to the United States, and we were trying to prepare for our next playing gig. We went to an exposure camp in Miami where all these players come in, maybe 50 guys play, trying to play in front of some scouts, general managers, in hopes of trying to get your next job. Some of those are good. Some of those are scams, just money grabs. This one, I still don't know. I didn't get a job from it, but it was a great experience. Got some film, got it on my resume. But I just remember talking to my friend, my teammate in Australia. He was at the exposure camp with me at the end, and he knew I was kind of well connected. And he said, he goes, you could just do this yourself. He's like, you get some coaches to watch this, send them the film. You could easily run this, just because I was kind of well connected in the basketball industry. And then I'd really thought about it for a couple months, and I was like, you know what, you're right. And then I just basically gave it a go. It started with my first exposure camp. I ran one in Michigan in September of 2015, and that's kind of when my sports management company took off. I ended up getting 3 guys signed, one guy in Asia and a couple guys in Australia from my exposure camp. And then I was like, this could be a real thing. I could turn this into a sports management company and try to get coaches jobs, try to get players jobs, do things like edit resumes for players, make highlight films for players. These are all things that I did and still do. Now it's more of a side hustle. So I'm very busy coaching now. So it's not something I can do all the time. So it's something also to make money in between those past playing jobs and coaching jobs. Now that I have a more stable job coaching with the Saigon Heat, I'm not quite as active with Van Pelt Sports Management, but I actually have a couple of interns who help push it forward and keep me busy there. But really, it's kind of another platform to help people as well as make money on the side. Just kind of sending players, sending coaches to different countries with jobs, many times places that I went and played and made connections. So I'd stay in touch with the team I played for and say, hey, I can send you players next season if you want, if you don't like the agents you've been working with. That's kind of how I started, and it's just grown since then. And yeah, it's just something I kind of do in the side hustle now, but enjoy doing it. Been able to help some people out along the way, and also made a side dollar doing it. So it's been fun.
The definition of entrepreneurship and thinking outside the box and saying, you know what, wait, why can't I do this? You're doing it yourself, and now you're also helping other people, making side money. I mean, it's great. I love it, and I love that you were able to take the initiative and do that. The one thing that stood out to me, right, is your passion for basketball. It's undeniable. You've been to so many different places, and that's obviously what helps you with Van Pelt Sports Management. It helps you it helps you with everything, obviously, because everything you're doing revolves around the game. With COVID, we realized what the world was like, what life was like when basketball was taken away from us for a little bit. And I'm curious, right? I mean, obviously, we would never want this to happen, but if basketball was erased from the world, I saw that you did some stuff with writing. I've seen that you do some other stuff outside the game maybe before that. We didn't get to talk about, your major in college and how you really had a passion for writing, I guess, at the start. But what would you do? I mean, someone that's been everywhere, that's been all over the game, if basketball was erased off the face of the earth?
That's a very good question. Hopefully I don't have to answer it soon because I'm enjoying this.
Never.
But I do love travel, obviously, and I do love writing. I had some jobs as a sports writer in the past. I actually interviewed for a job with the Lakers at a time when I had torn my MCL and I couldn't play. I interviewed for a writing job with Lakers Nation. Didn't end up getting the job, but I would maybe do something like sports writing or try to travel and write about the places I'm traveling to. Writing is still a hobby of mine. I'm not really working in it full time now. I've had some blogs and a few jobs here and there. That was my degree, in case I didn't end up going to play pro basketball, but I got to go play pro ball. And then my English writing degree has kind of been a backup plan since then, but I'm still passionate about it. So I would definitely still consider something along those paths. If I could travel and write about it, I guess that would kind of be the ultimate job for me if I could.
I'd much rather see you coaching for the foreseeable future for years down the line, because I know that's what you're passionate about. But it's always interesting thinking about just the other things the other hobbies that make us all go. It's always a cool thinking about that. Coach Matt, thank you so much for joining the show. I'm really excited to learn so much about everything you've done before. It's absurd, the number of countries, the number of places you've been to. It really blew my mind, and it just makes me excited about the fact that there's that opportunity in basketball. That someone can do what you did and travel the world playing the game they love. So thank you so much for joining the show, and we'll definitely stay in touch and can't wait to talk again soon.
No worries. Thanks a lot for having me. I appreciate it.
Thanks for listening to Gen Z Hoops. Make sure to follow, like, and subscribe on Instagram, LinkedIn, and all major social media platforms at Gen Z Hoops. You can tune in and subscribe on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, YouTube, and every other podcast platform on the planet. Get ready for the next episode.